Okay, let's dive in. We are unpacking the next huge chapter of Rome's story. This is the era of, well, world conquest, political implosion, and then its final transformation into the empire.
Exactly. And our mission today is to track this great paradox. How does a republic, a fiercely independent one, achieve total dominance? And, why does that very success end up destroying the system that created it?
It's just the ultimate story of unintended consequences, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And the timeline we're covering moves at warp speed. We're looking at about 2 centuries. It starts with Rome on the brink of collapse thanks to one man, Hannibal.
And it ends with the famous Pax Romana, the Roman peace under Augustus.
Right. And in between, you get a century of revolution, the rise and fall of Caesar. It's where you see how winning can actually be more destructive than losing.
And we are starting with what must have felt like absolute world-ending defeat. The year is 218 BC. Rome's greatest enemy, Hannibal Barca, does something just unthinkable.
The genius of this man is, it's hard to overstate. He takes his army, we're talking 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and crucially 37 war elephants, and marches them out of Spain.
Not towards Rome by sea, but overland, across Gaul, and then straight over the Alps in winter.
Elephants over the Alps. I mean, we say it casually, but the logistics of that 15-day crossing are just a complete nightmare.
The sources are brutal. They talk about hostile tribes, avalanches, the cold. He lost nearly half his army.
And most of the elephants. But the psychological shock of his arrival, that was worth it. He arrived in Italy when no one thought it was possible.
And the men who survived were now these hardened veterans, completely loyal to him and ready to fight where Rome was least prepared.
Precisely. And what happens next is just a brutal lesson in tactics. First at the Trebia River and then Lake Trasimene.
Trasimene is a classic.
An ambush, right?
A perfect ambush. He uses the morning fog, the terrain, hides his forces on a hillside, and lures about 15,000 Romans into this narrow trap between the hills and the lake. It was an annihilation. But that wasn't even the worst of it.
Not even close. The Senate decides, okay, enough is enough. They pool all their resources, assemble the largest army in Roman history, something like 86,000 men.
And they march out to finally crush Hannibal's 50,000 men at a place called Cannae.
They had the numbers. They had the home field advantage. But Hannibal had a plan. One of the most brilliant tactical masterpieces in military history.
He didn't just meet them head on.
No. He deliberately made his center weak, a shallow curve. So when the huge Roman legions pushed forward, they thought they were winning. They just kept pressing deeper and deeper into this pocket.
It was a trap.
A perfect trap built on Roman arrogance. While the Roman center surged forward, Hannibal's wings held firm, and then his cavalry, his best troops, swept around behind them.
A double envelopment. They were completely surrounded.
Totally encircled, trapped shoulder to shoulder. They couldn't even lift their arms to fight properly. They couldn't retreat. It was a slaughterhouse.
And the numbers, they're just horrifying.
Yeah.
Our sources say somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 Romans died in one afternoon.
To put that in perspective for you, more Romans died in a few hours at Cannae than Americans did in the entire Vietnam War.
Wow. Any other nation in history would have surrendered on the spot.
They would have, and Hannibal fully expected them to. He waited for the peace envoys. But this is the core of what made Rome. Rome. They didn't negotiate.
They refused to even ransom their own captured soldiers.
They basically said, you can die for Rome. They melted down temple treasures for money. They raised new armies. They even recruited slaves to fight. And they adopted a new strategy.
The Fabian Strategy.
Exactly. Named after Fabius Maximus. The plan was simple. Do not, under any circumstances, fight Hannibal in an open battle. Just harass his supply lines, starve him out.
And that refusal to break, that stubbornness, it bought them time.
It bought them time. And time allowed a new general to emerge, Scipio, later known as Scipio Africanus, and he realized something critical.
You don't beat Hannibal in Italy.
You beat him by taking the war to his home, to Carthage itself. So Scipio invades Spain, cuts off Hannibal's supply lines, and then lands an army in North Africa,
forcing Carthage to recall Hannibal to defend the city.
And at the final showdown, the Battle of Zama in 22 BC, Scipio actually uses Hannibal's own tactics against him, and he wins. Rome secures total victory.
But it's not enough. Decades later, you have the senator, Cato the Elder,
who ends every single speech he gives in the Senate, no matter the topic, with the same 5 words. Carthago delenda est.
Carthage must be destroyed.
And in 146 BC, they did it. They besieged the city, demolished it stone by stone, and sold the 50,000 survivors into slavery. It was a statement.
With Carthage gone, Rome was the undisputed master of the Mediterranean.
Absolutely. Greece, Asia Minor, Syria, Egypt, they all fall. They start calling the Mediterranean Mare Nostrum.
RC.
And while the official justification was often, liberating people, the real motivation was wealth and glory for ambitious politicians.
Which leads to this fascinating cultural reversal.
It does. The poet Horace put it perfectly. Captive Greece captured her fierce conqueror. Rome conquered Greece with swords, but Greek philosophy, art, and ideas completely conquered the Roman elite.
But this is where the great paradox kicks in. All of this success, all this expansion, is what begins to tear the Republic apart from the inside.
Yes. The whole system was built on the idea of the farmer soldier, a man who owned a small plot of land, fought for the state, and then came home.
But these new wars were far away. They lasted for years, sometimes decades.
So while these men are fighting and dying overseas, their farms at home are failing, and the wealthy elite, who are flush with cash from all this conquest.
And, critically, a huge new supply of slave labor.
Exactly. They buy up all this failing land and create these massive slave-worked estates, the latifundia.
So the veterans come home to find they have no farm, no job, and they can't compete with slave labor.
And you get this huge, impoverished, landless class flooding into the city of Rome, totally dependent on the state for food. The backbone of the Republic is just shattered.
And when someone finally tries to fix this, the response is brutal.
You're talking about the Gracchus brothers, Tiberius and Gaius. In the 130s and 120s BC, they proposed land reform, just, breaking up some of these huge estates to give land back to the poor.
A pretty reasonable idea, you'd think.
The wealthy senators saw it as a direct attack on their property, on their entire way of life, and they threw out the rule book. Tiberius Gracchus was cornered by a mob of senators.
Senators, not some random mob.
Senators and their clients, and they beat him to death with wooden benches from the Senate House.
Let me just stop you there. That moment, is that the point of no return? Long before Caesar, is this when the Republic is truly doomed?
I think the sources strongly suggest that yes. The moment the political elite decide that murder is a legitimate tool to use against a political opponent, the game has changed. The old Republic is effectively dead. It just doesn't know it yet.
And right on the heels of that political breakdown, you get a military one.
Driven by a general named Gaius Marius. He needs soldiers for his wars, but the old pool of landowning farmers has dried up, so he does something revolutionary.
He opens the army to the landless poor.
The very men who'd been displaced. And this completely changes everything about military loyalty.
How so?
Before, a soldier's loyalty was to the state, the Republic. Now, these men have nothing. Their loyalty is to one person, the general who promises them pay, loot, and most importantly, a plot of land when they retire.
So the armies become private forces, loyal to a man, not an institution.
Precisely, and that creates the age of the strongmen. The first to really exploit this is Sulla. He and Marius become rivals, and in 88 BC, Sulla does the unthinkable.
He marches his army on Rome itself.
The first to ever do so. He seizes power, executes his enemies, and makes himself dictator. The precedent has now set. Whoever has the most loyal army controls Rome.
And that precedent leads us directly to the most famous Roman of them all, Gaius Julius Caesar.
A figure who seems almost larger than life. He claimed he was descended from the goddess Venus. He was charming, brilliant, but also possessed this ruthless political and military genius.
And he sees the blueprint Sulla laid out. He needs an army loyal only to him.
And he gets one by conquering Gaul. For 8 years, starting in 58 BC, he campaigns, generating staggering wealth, glory, and a battle-hardened, fanatically loyal army.
And he's writing his own PR the whole time with his book, The Gallic Wars.
It was basically instant propaganda, and it worked perfectly. But his success terrified the conservative faction back in Rome, led by his old ally, Pompey.
They see him as a threat.
A massive threat. They order him to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, which they knew would mean prosecution, exile, and ruin for him.
So he has a choice. Give up everything or start a civil war.
And on January 10th, 49 BC, he marches his army to the edge of the Rubicon River, the legal boundary of his command. He crosses it and he says the famous words.
Alea acta est. The die is cast.
Civil war. He crushes Pompey, becomes dictator for life, and he enacts a lot of good reforms. The calendar we still use, debt laws, but he's too open about his power.
The purple robes, the golden throne.
And putting his own face on coins, that was the big one. To a Roman, that screamed king, the one thing they swore they'd never have again.
Which leads to the Ides of March, 44 BC. 60 senators surround him at the foot of a statue of his great rival Pompey and stab him 23 times.
And the great, terrible irony is that in killing him to save the Republic, they actually destroyed it for good. The power vacuum they created just led to another, even bloodier round of civil wars.
And from that chaos, two figures emerge. Caesar's top general, Mark Antony, and his unknown 18-year-old adopted son, Octavian.
They hunt down and defeat the assassins, and then, of course, they turn on each other.
The final showdown is at the naval battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian defeats Antony and his ally, Queen Cleopatra of Egypt, and Octavian is left as the sole, undisputed master of the Roman world.
And this is where the empire truly begins. But he's so much more subtle than Caesar was. In 27 BC, he's given the title Augustus, the revered one.
So he learned from his adoptive father's mistakes. He saw what happened when you were too obvious about being a king.
Absolutely. It was brilliant political branding. He never called himself emperor or king. He insisted he was just the princeps, the first citizen.
But
in reality, he controlled everything. The army, the treasury, the courts. He ruled for over 40 years and could genuinely boast that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble.
And he kicks off the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. 200 years of stability and prosperity.
Unprecedented stability. And it's built on a foundation of incredible infrastructure. Over 50,000 miles of paved roads, aqueducts pumping millions of gallons of water into cities.
I mean, the phrase, all roads lead to Rome, was literally true.
It was. But daily life for the average person in the city? It was tough. The rich had their villas, but the poor were crammed into these rickety, dangerous apartment blocks, the insulae.
Prone to fire and collapse.
Constantly. So the government's solution to keep this massive poor population from rioting was simple. Panem et circenses.
Bread and circuses.
Free grain for hundreds of thousands of citizens to keep them fed, and spectacular violent games to keep them distracted. Gladiators, animal hunts, all held in places like the Colosseum, which could hold 50,000 people.
So the emperors who followed Augustus were a bit of a mixed bag. You get the insane ones like Caligula and Nero.
You do, but then you get the period the sources call the true Golden Age, the era of the 5 good emperors.
Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, from 96 to 180 AD. The historian Gibbon called it the happiest time in human history.
And the reason for it was so simple but so radical. They chose their successors not based on blood, but on ability. They adopted the most capable man and trained him to rule.
A meritocracy.
A true meritocracy. Under Trajan, the empire reached its absolute peak in size, and the last of the line was Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, a brilliant, dutiful man who made one single catastrophic mistake.
He broke the pattern.
He broke the one rule that had made the Golden Age possible. Instead of adopting a worthy successor, he passed the throne to his biological son, Commodus.
And Commodus was not his father.
Not even close. He was unstable, obsessed with fighting as a gladiator, and at one point even renamed Rome after himself. His reign was a disaster.
And it ends with his assassination in 192 AD by his wrestling partner, of all people, which immediately plunges the empire back into civil war. The Golden Age is over, just like that.
So we've seen Rome survive Hannibal, conquer the world, and then destroy its own republic through political violence, starting with the Gracchi. Then it finds this sort of disguised stability under Augustus and hits this incredible peak with the 5 good emperors.
And looking back at the sources, what's so striking is how fast it all fell apart. The system worked perfectly when it was based on merit, on choosing the best person for the job.
But that was immediately thrown away for a return to dynastic rule with Commodus.
We watched this empire thrive for nearly a century under a system of competence, only to see it crumble the second the personal desire for family succession came back into play. It makes you wonder, what are the lessons in that transition from Marcus Aurelius to Commodus for any system of government today?
It's a chilling reminder of how fragile even the mightiest structures can be, and it's definitely something for you to mull over.